Welcome, Segment 1 students, to this afternoon's Mars, Pluto, in the Crescent phase. This is the second of an 8-part webinar series with these two powerhouse planets that has a lot to do with our life and desired nature, as we say in EA. So I'll turn it over to you, Kim, and welcome to the webinar, everybody.
Just a second, I'm going to make sure it's recording. Yep. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Segment 1 class for March of 2020. I was going to say March of 2000. Today, as Leroy said, we're going to look at Mars, Pluto in Crescent phase. Before we get started, though, here, of course, are the links for the different ways you can study with us at EAN, which I know many of you are already familiar with. And so, first of all, when we look at the cycle of phases and aspects, I'm just going to do that little review of how we determine aspects in evolutionary astrology between any two planets. Obviously, we're specifically looking at Mars, Pluto, but you can use this with any two planets and even points in space. When it comes to points in space, you start with the planet and then move the point. I'll tell you more on this in just a moment. So we always start with the slower moving planet and we move the faster moving planet counterclockwise. Now, over the years, I have kind of switched this a little bit from Jeffrey Green's original teachings. I compare the inner planets to the sun. As you see, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars on your slide, and I compare the sun to the outer planets. And so you have 3 examples here, starting with Pluto all the way around the circle. Mercury is a balsamic conjunction to Pluto. Starting with Pluto, going to Venus, it's about 11 degrees beyond. It is new phase to Pluto. And again, exceptions to the sun, I start with Saturn all the way around the circle, and the sun is balsamic phase to Saturn. If you need more information on this, we did do a 5-part series breaking down how to do the math and also then going through the specific phases. I think we did that back in 2014. When you are looking at the nodal axis, the nodes of the moon, the nodes of any planet, if you use the planetary nodes, the nodes of any planet, including the moon, are always compared, nodes of any planet, yes, I got it right, are always compared to the planets themselves, and they are compared in a clockwise manner. And so if we use the example that you see on the screen here, and we start with Uranus, if we follow this inner circle right here of the nodes, north node, south node here, it is a gibbous opposition to Uranus. If it was 19 degrees and 9 minutes, it'd be an exact opposition to Uranus. If it was 18 degrees Sag, it would be a full phase opposition to Uranus. If we start with Uranus and go the outer circle around the zodiac, the north node is making a balsamic conjunction to Uranus. Now, for any of you who have observed the points in space of ascendant, midheaven, and you watch them go in a clockwise fashion, what we do is we start with the planet and we go clockwise to the midheaven. Say, for instance, start with sun. We go clockwise to the descendant. You figure out the degrees. The 4 points in space that we're talking about here, 1st, 10th, 7th, 4th house cusps, are always compared to planets in a clockwise fashion if you're wondering how to look at those. So, in general, with Pluto as representative of the soul and evolution, the soul always in a constant state of becoming and evolving, we have the 2 different ways in which evolution takes place: non-cataclysmic and cataclysmic. And the two can blend together in any combination. The two forms of non-cataclysmic evolution with Pluto: one, we can produce or create a situation in which we form a relationship to something that we perceive we need. One of the most common ways that we do this is forming an intimate relationship with another person. We are always attracted to whatever we perceive in them that does not exist within us. And many times, relative to Pluto, these attractions happen unconsciously. We're not even necessarily aware of it. We can also produce or create a situation in which we become aware of a new capacity or capability that has been latent or dormant. And many times that latency is something that we've learned in a past life that then comes into consciousness in this life, and it will require our perseverance and will to actualize. However, I will also say that if it's a latency that we have from past lives, if we make that effort and will, we may be able to learn it easier or more efficiently or even faster than, say, if it's the first time we start to learn something new. Example in my case is I have been an astronomer in past lives. I have been an astrologer in past lives. I literally was self-taught. I was able to just sit down with books and articles and did it all myself by hand. And I just seem to have learned astrology um, quite easily when I started way back when, 3+ decades ago. We also have cataclysmic evolution with Pluto, the soul. And one way is producing or creating emotional shocks. Emotional, the soul operates on a very emotional basis. You can relate this to Pluto's rulership of Scorpio and 8th house. These emotional shocks in which some behavior or life situation is forcefully removed from us. You see common examples there: divorce, job loss, health emergency, all the way up to the literal death of the body and the soul leaving. The second way is we can produce or create situations in our lives in which we become aware of an internal or external source of stagnation or limitation blocking further growth. And it will create a crisis in various ways. And to use the example of, say, a divorce, in the first case, it's usually the partner leaving us. In the second case, it would be us recognizing the stagnation or limitations of the relationship, and we leave the partner. And regardless of who's left or who's doing the leaving, it creates a crisis for both people involved. And sometimes you can do the, what's her name, Gwyneth Paltrow, and have that conscious uncoupling where maybe the crisis is minimized. In other cases, it can come at us out of the blue and be a pretty intense shock. And it can still be that way for both people, even the one leaving. There are 3 reactions to the evolutionary impulse. 1, we can resist it as much as possible. 2, we can go for it 100% or 95% and just embrace it altogether. Both of those tend to be rare reactions or choices. The most common one is 3. We're willing to make changes in some ways, yet we resist changing in other ways due to fear of the unknown. And we could also say due to the security mechanisms we've built up with the status quo. That can also be in there as well. Excuse me. I'm going to make a little note for myself to add this on in future months classes. Now, as you start to study evolutionary astrology, one of the principles you'll become aware of is that we will generally look at the phases of Mars Pluto to understand how many lifetimes the soul has been working upon a specific natal Pluto house. And we say in general, it will take 8, sometimes 9 primary lifetimes for the soul to work through the lessons of the main karmic dynamic and evolutionary intent of Pluto. Now, those primary lifetimes are known when Mars and Pluto are in one of the 8 specific 45-degree aspects to each other. For me personally, if I'm looking at a Pleiadian aspect, less than one of the 45-degree points, I use anywhere from 3 to 0 degree orb of aspect. And after the aspect separating, I use 0 to 5 degree orb. Now, that doesn't mean those are the only lifetimes. There can be multiple secondary lifetimes working through the same lessons, although it won't be quite as intense. It'll be a little slower or more indirectly. And this is all based upon the premise that our souls have free choice and free will to take as long as we want or go as fast as we want in understanding and learning the lessons of that specific Pluto house. Relate it back to those 3 reactions to the evolutionary impulse. Resistance, it's going to take longer. Totally go for it, we're going to go faster. Most of us, again, in between the two, back and forth. So here's the specifics of the Mars-Pluto angles, as you can see on your screen. And all of these that are listed here, and again, you can go 44, 45, 46, 47 degrees. They're all specific 45-degree aspects, which is the harmonics of 8. It's taking the 360 circle, dividing it by 8. Secondary lifetimes can either be specific non-45-degree aspects, as you see on your screen, say the waxing trine of 120, or the semi-sextile of 30 degrees or 300 degrees. And it can also be Mars-Pluto just in a phasal relationship with no specific aspect. Now, if you are someone who has studied Jeffrey Green's Pluto books in detail, you will see that there are some conflicting writings. Jeffrey wasn't always clear on this. And in addition to determining aspects between planets and the nodal axis, this is one of the other areas where I did research when I ran his school for 6 years. And with the help of other astrologers, we went back over all of his old message board writings and kind of weighed the percentages in which, well, this way, that way. And so this is pretty much what we came up with in looking at the history of all of Jeffrey's writings, published and unpublished. Now, here's a question that we all tend to ask. Do souls go through lifetimes in consecutive Mars-Pluto phasal relationship order via a specific Pluto house? Answer, who knows? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think anybody knows the answer. We can intuit the other side, but how many of us go over and then come back and say it's this? I have a tendency to be on the most likely not specifically in consecutive order because life is so multifaceted. And just look at yourself, and as you go through life and you want to start a project, how many times do you start it and you just work on it till you're done? In life, you get interrupted. You go on and do another project, and then you come back to that original one. And so life tends to be a mixture of specific effort and haphazard chance things happening. In the end, I do feel that relative to a specific Pluto house, you're going to have a lifetime with Mars in one of those 845-degree primary aspects until you really learn the lessons of that house. And then we're going to do it through all 12 houses. And we can even do it more than once. I remember Jeffrey Green saying one time, if we knew how many past lives we all had, we'd be depressed. There's a reason why we have an unconsciousness within the soul. And the expanding inconsciousness within the soul of being able to hold the memories of all past lives and not go crazy is one of the major lessons we all embark on. So here's a visual for you again with the whole cycle of phases and aspects. And so in this example, of course, we are using Pluto at 0 degrees. You see Mars at the conjunction of new phase, or if it's can be balsamic phase, if Mars is approaching Pluto and finishing up those primary lifetimes. You can see then Mars at the 45, 90, 135, etc. mark. And so this is showing you the 8, 9 lifetimes that we will all have with these specific Mars-Pluto phases. Here's a listing for you in case you are wanting to see those specific degrees. One of the things you'll learn to do with time as a student of evolutionary astrology is pretty much be able to memorize these phases and grasp them between any two planets. Remember, life or us souls, we are always in a state of continuous change and evolution. And this is known through the archetype of Mars, Aries, first house, the initial archetype of the zodiac, in which we are always instinctively acting upon that desire nature in some way, the leading edge of the separating and the returning desires. And if we look at 0 to 360, it represents a complete cycle of evolution from birth, growth, bloom, decay, and death to rebirth again. Finally, remember that every planet and or point in space is in a phasal relationship to every other planet or point in space. There may or may not be an aspect between them. And so when traditional astrology says, I got a sneeze, excuse me. It passed. It's trying to hold on. By the time I muted myself, all gone. See if it comes back. So, for example, in my specific situation, if you look at my moon in traditional aspects, it's pretty much unaspected. And so traditional astrology will say that that planet is all over the place. It doesn't have anything to relate to. Well, that's actually a false statement because my moon is in a phasal relationship to every other planet in the chart. And when you really want to start grasping interpretations between the different aspects, you start with the phasal relationship between any two planets first, and you grasp that. Then you fill in details to any specific aspect as it may exist. So here we go, jumping right in. Whoops, got to get my slides going again. One more time, here is just the generic aspects, or excuse me, generic slide of the phases and aspects for you to have a one more time to look at. And what we are going to work with today is specifically Mars and Pluto in the crescent phase between 45 and 90 degrees. As you see here visually, it is a yin phase. And by yin, we mean energy is returning back to the center or going inward. The key word for the crescent phase is struggle. There is a struggle to take everything that we learned and initiated new phase and now gel it together and bring it into something we will really learn how to manifest in new ways as we get to the 90-degree square. It turned out this class that we only have one volunteer. I had, initial pick me, and then oops, my Mars Pluto phase is different. I think everybody or a few people had to go back and really learn the math of their Mars Pluto phases. And so I am going to go through all of the various aspects in crescent phase, and then we will look at the one chart with our volunteer. And so in general, crescent phase, the evolutionary cycle of the desired nature, again, between Mars and Pluto, we're being specific here, it's now internalized, yin, and efforts are made, that struggle, to create new individual forms and structures that allow for that new evolutionary intention of desires to take root. New phase was so much about all of the experience of random desires relative to Pluto Mars sign house in detail. Now we are continuing to narrow the random experiences, and we're trying to take what we have initiated so far and build upon it. The crescent phase between any two planets is going to take personal effort. This is a real individualization process. Me, what do I desire? And we go inward to ponder it and to build up that individual will to move those desires forward. And just like in astrology, every sign or house has its opposite sign and house. Astrology works via polarity with the circle. The same thing is true of the 8 phases. Every phase has an opposite phase. And the opposite phase of crescent is disseminating phase. Let me just go back for one moment and show you if you want to see this right here visually. All right. Now, so happens that the phases match up yin and yang, but the disseminating phase keyword is society. Here's where we're approaching 3/4 of the way around the circle, and I kind of call this phase been there, done that. Leading up to the crises in consciousness, what does it all mean? I have finished my manifestations in so many different ways. So what will happen then in crescent phase is there is the temptation or the fear to slide back into the past, to go back to the old desires and old patterns that we've had between Mars, Pluto. And we'll make an effort to look at this with our volunteer today. The other situation is that the opposite phase, disseminating or society, it knows more than us. It's been there, done that. It's already established their desires and the achievement of those desires out there in the world. Whereas Crescent phase is just really trying to gel it together and figure that out. So it can be easy for us to fall back into less than, rather than trusting that internalization process within ourself and really individualizing our desire nature and the expression of it. So now let's take this phase into specific aspects. And the first one we're going to get to is the separating side of the semi-square. And so this new intention of our desire nature, it intensifies to do something with it. Even though it's yin phase, when it's the separating side of 45 degrees, 46, 47, 48, it really, there's just a pressure to really manifest all that we have expressed in that first 45 degrees. Remember, for most souls, this is going to be operating pretty unconsciously from past lives. And so there is that struggle to manifest even through the yin phase. Who am I? What do I want? How do I be me? How do I let go of all my old desires? That old me and old way of being. How do I really move forward into the new ways and manifest that evolving desire nature within my soul? How do I make it into that material world so that my soul has some sense of individualistic accomplishment? And as we work to do that, and then we start moving through the crescent phase, we start to recognize there's still more work. There's still more evolving of what our desires really are and how we want to evolve the manifestations of them. And so the next aspect we're going to run into is the septile. As you can see, when you see harmonics of a number on your screen, it is taking the 360 degrees and dividing it by that number. 360 divided by 7 equals 51. That's where you get the septile, biseptile, triseptile, etc. And so what the septiles represent is an appearance of what would be fatedness with people or circumstances in our life that works to align the soul or realign the soul with whatever its intentions are relative to the desire nature, the emerging new desires here with Pluto and Mars. And so when we have that appearance of fatedness or realignment, it creates this sense of a special destiny. There's something within my desires that I am here to align, to manifest, to create, to bring into being. And so, one more time, the universe will bring in people into our life. The universe will bring in circumstances and situations or events into our life that help us with manifesting these desires in ways that are highest and best for us, or in ways that help us get back on our path, if we need to. And so there is an initiation of experiences and actions. Again, like Crescent phase is always struggling to evolve and build, and it goes back and forth between this is what I want to do and I'm doing it, and oh, but is that really the best I can do, or is this really what I want? And then we back off and doubt and wonder. It is just a continual manifestation. There must be more manifestation. There must be more that can go on throughout this phase. Now, with this septile aspect, if our actions appear to be sporadic and or confused, then Jeffrey's teachings would say that there are non-harmonious planetary pairs. I've been kind of evolving with this concept as well. If you look at harmonious planetary pairs, let's just bring in the other, if there's kind of clear and consistent action, then it is two harmonious pairs looking together. If you think of sun and moon, harmonious pair. If you think of Saturn individuated consciousness, Uranus individuated unconsciousness, that's more or less a harmonious, using that word broadly, planetary pair. They just have something to do together. Mars Pluto is looked at in that way, but we wouldn't necessarily think that with Mars and Uranus, or we wouldn't necessarily think of that between, say, Moon and Mercury. We don't necessarily consider them to be planets that are harmonious or working in tandem with each other. I kind of evolve with this. I think your harmonious planetary pairs can have sporadic and confused action. And I think maybe Moon and Mercury can sometimes have clear and consistent actions. Again, if you look at it this way, you would consider Mars and Pluto to just totally be in that harmonious planetary pair. Pluto, the soul, the unconscious desire nature, Mars, the conscious part of the soul's desire nature. I still think these two could probably have sporadic and confused actions. I bring this up not to tell you to agree with me, but to invite you to look at this yourself. If you have any planets that are in the septile aspects to each other. This can be the septile, the biseptile, and the triseptile. Okay. As we move on from what appears to be those fated events and that special sense of destiny with desires, we move into the 60-degree sextile. This is half a trine. Here, that process of consciously understanding that new evolutionary cycle with regard to our desires, Mars, Pluto, it occurs through contrast and compare, contrast and compare. And what it is we're starting to get an ease in that crescent phase of being able to manifest. But relative to that polarity disseminating phase, we go compare it outside of ourselves and go, okay, yes, no, blah, blah. And we'll go back and forth in doing that. And so what happens then with that 60-degree aspect relative to crescent phase, from time to time, the soul is going to need it to isolate itself from the impact of that external environment, disseminating phase, to discover from within itself what is unique and what is individualistic for us, what is working or not working for us in manifesting those new desires. And so what we have happened then is actions are still internalized to some extent, crescent phase, as the soul self-contemplates in contrast to always focusing only on what everybody else is doing outside of us disseminating phase. And so we can start to understand which issues are coming from the past in regards to our desire nature. And we understand that both for our own individual desires, and we can look at this from a collective perspective as well with various planetary pairs. We can look at it collectively with Mars, Pluto, and waxing sextile from the perspective of the sign Pluto was in addition to the specific house. And then that's going to give us more information in regards to our generational lessons, but what belongs in the past and what has to start evolving into new expressions and new desires for us within our generation. We also start to understand what choices are necessary in order to foster and support the development of this new evolutionary desire nature, what its purpose is in an individual way. And we can one more time say, and relative to the generation we were born into. Now, something that I learned a long time ago that really stuck for me in Jeffrey Green's teachings is that when any two planets are in a waxing sextile to each other, faster moving planet to slower moving planet, that 60-degree mark is an important point for making choices because the choices that we make will have an impact. They will be reflected through the rest of the cycle between those two planets. And so somebody who has Mars, Pluto, in that waxing sextile aspect will, with this information, take an extra look at these choices relative to their desires and expressing them, manifesting them, because it will affect their desire nature and the manifestation of it through the rest of the cycle, however many lifetimes it takes. Now, we just happen to have our volunteer example with this specific aspect between Mars and Pluto. So we'll look at that in more detail here relative to volunteer's chart in a few slides. After that, we run into the quintile, and this is the harmonics of 5, quintile by quintiles. If you start to recognize this, that 0 is going to be the harmonics of any of the numbers and counting as one of those aspects, new or balsamic. Quintiles are known as creativity. Septiles, special destiny, fatedness. Quintiles, creativity. Here, the process of creative transformation through that internal individualizing of the new evolutionary desires starts to take place. We really start to have a surgence of expressing the creative desires within the soul. So whether I have the desire for a relationship or whether I have the desire for a job or whether I have the desire within my soul nature to travel, with this Mars Pluto aspect, creativity to really be able to bring that into being starts to take place. And so it becomes quite personal for us. It becomes quite individualistic. It becomes quite specific within the context of what it is we want to creatively manifest through our desires. One more time, it's crescent phase, but that new desire nature is wanting to externalize in some way. There's still pull from past desires, but that desire to really bring it outward, to be able to manifest it through the five senses and see it, taste it, feel it, be it, do it, what blah, blah. It's starting to become stronger, 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 stronger. And that will continue all the way through to the crescent side of the first quarter square or crises in action. And so when we get closer to that 90-degree mark, and if you want to, you can start to even expand this with those squares and oppositions in a primary lifetime. If you feel so inclined to use a little bit wider orbs, it is totally, kosher, okay to do that. With the aspect less than 90 degrees, it is an evolutionary gate for Mars and Pluto, and they're getting ready to go from crescent phase to first quarter phase, or from yin energy back to yang energy, energy moving outward from the center. The closer it gets, Mars from Pluto, to 87, 88, 89, 89 and a half degrees, we just feel that energy of, I mean, it's almost like a giving birth energy in that I'm, we're 9.5 months pregnant, and when do I get the baby out? That's the feeling with the crescent side of a first quarter square. We also will sense a high degree of internalized compression with our desires. It's coming into such a strong focus. It's the phrase they use in quantum physics where you have the randomness condensed down into manifestation. It's like the funnel effect in quantum physics. And so we become acutely aware of what new structures and forms we want to manifest within our desire nature. This is make it or break it. We have spent 90 degrees trying to put it all together and refine all these new random experiences and the testing and gelling of and fine tuning. And so now it's really about manifesting whatever the initial impulse was, that initial evolutionary intent that happened from the new phase of Mars Pluto. And in this case, you will still look at where natal Pluto is by sign and house. That's going to be the point that represents that new phase. Even though Mars is now almost 90 degrees beyond it, it's still going to be relative to that natal Pluto. So what will also happen is there is an intensity in an unconscious fear of failure. Can I really manifest it? Can I actualize it? Can I do it? There is a crisis in action to manifest on the less than 90-degree side of the waxing square, as well as the separating. In other words, let me say it another way.
If we're looking at the waxing square of 90 degrees, there is as much crises in action applying square as there is separating square when you look at those 5 or so degrees on either side. The closer it is to 90 degrees, whether 89 or 91, the more intense it is, the more there can be that fear. I can't do it, I can't do it on the crescent side because it's new. It's a new desire nature relative to that natal Pluto signature. The soul hasn't been here before in this particular way. So can I take these desires and actually establish them and create them in society? And so there gets to be a real strong temptation here. It's a review, but it's a strong temptation to just fall back into the old patterns, the old ways, the old desires, or I can't do it. And we withdraw. We don't make the effort. We don't go out there into the world and do it. And if we get into the fear and we withdraw and we just start to sit on the desire, eventually pressure is going to build up to the point where we have to take action. But there can be a going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And if I may, just for a moment, if you're a counseling astrologer and you're working with someone who has a faster moving planet, just less than 90 degrees to the slower moving planet, you take whatever that planetary pair is and you realize that they still have this real crisis going on to be able to evolve the manifestation of whatever that planetary pair is. And it can be very, very helpful for the soul whose chart is in question to recognize that they're going to go back and forth, back and forth. Okay, those are the slides for crescent phase. We are now going to move into our volunteer chart, but before we do, I just want to take a moment here and see if anyone attending live has any questions with this phase. And you're welcome to ask questions in general, even though this class is specifically with Mars Pluto. You can also ask questions specifically with, any of these aspects relative to Mars and Pluto. I'm going to take a drink of water. Just checking in for a moment. Questions, comments from anybody?
Be quiet.
Okay, Mercury's direct, so
We should be all chatty and everything.
well, words are moving, words are flowing and understood. Mars
And
direct, maybe.
we're just waiting for the opportunity to say the salient point at the right time. But you're going to have to help
Yes.
me with our volunteer.
Yep. Yep. One more time. I forgot to give you our volunteer said it was okay to use her name. Her name is Andrea.
Mhm.
So if you see her showing up.
Let's see if she's hooked up, ready to
Hello.
go. There she is.
Hello,
I'm
we hear.
here.
All right. Hello, sweetie. We hear you.
Hello.
Yes, thank you for volunteering your chart. And oh, Leroy was helping me out. I have to go get the specific page to your environmental conditionings. It's sitting where I was prepping your chart. So while I do that, everybody just read through the environmental conditionings you see on your screen. I'll be right back.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm always trying to condense environmental conditionings down. Leroy, I may ask you to mute volunteer just because I hear a little feedback. And so volunteer, I just want to speak for just a little bit. And so I will specifically ask Leroy to unmute you on our end, and we'll mute you back on our end just because you are attending all the way from Portugal. Thank you very much. And so we'll try and minimize our cyberspace as much as possible. And so I wanted to go get her environmental conditionings because there were a couple of things that she had stated that I just want to add to the picture here. And it was a little too much to write out, but I feel that it is relative to what we want to look at here. For those of you who may have trouble seeing, birth data November 16th, 1980, 4:15 p.m. Maputo, Mozambique, and I'm probably butchering my pronunciations. Apologies. And so this soul and family moved to Portugal when they were 3 years old. Dad was atheist, mom Catholic. Dad had PTSD from the war. There was a lot of alcohol for him and violence towards mom. Um, this person does not have any children, no marriages, although there have been several intense love relationships. A few of them have ended in friendship. There was a bit of emotional sexual abuse in those relationships. Our client is a practicing astrologer. She also is a yoga and meditation teacher, and mother is very interested in that work with her. Father has been deceased. The environmental conditionings that I did not get in here was that this female volunteer has always felt herself devoted to nature like a pantheist. And until she was around 16 years old, in a very deep way, she felt she should be living in a tribe in the middle of nature. She feels that she suffered for having to live an urban way of life. And in addition to that, she also has had and this is going to be relative to that sun, which for me I consider to be balsamic Uranus. You see it there, Scorpio 7th house. Since she was young, she has had very strong intuitive and Uranian flashes. And she used to have a guide that would just come to her and speak very randomly, very acute information. Sometimes she would react almost with shock with these messages, but it showed her since she was a young age that we are connected to a major awareness force. It also, though, gave me confusion. Sometimes spirits would contact me and I never knew quite how to deal with it. Now, she has been studying astrology, tarot yoga since 20, as well as Reiki, a lot of healing things, a lot of meditation work that she did since early years. There has also been experiences with ayahuasca and various drugs as well. So when I read this, it was the first thing that I really started keying into. And let me just back up here. The Mars-Pluto angle is just shy of 63 degrees. As you can see, it's just past the 60-degree waxing sextile. So for sake of the tape, here's Pluto at 23 degrees Libra in the 6th house.
the descendant is almost 29 degrees Libra. So there is about a 6 degrees before Pluto enters the descendant. So it is still fairly well inside the 6th house. Easy to see Venus is balsamic, this Pluto, as well as 4 planets in Libra. But relative to today's class, Mars is again 63 degrees beyond at about 26 degrees Sagittarius in Pluto's 8th house, and Mars's new phase Neptune at 21 degrees. So when I started looking at the environmental conditionings of this volunteer, and especially that closeness to nature, and feeling like she, belonged in a tribe, not in an urban city. The first thing I started keying in on as a Virgo soul or 6th house Pluto was this soul probably actually came from some type of tribal past lives, some type of indigenous cultures, as I say broadly, or shamanistic cultures, or as many of us will say in the evolutionary astrology world, perhaps even that daemon soul or daemon perspective. And for those of you who maybe new or don't know this, we go DAEMON. And that means a soul that is fused with nature, that never lost its connection to natural spiritual laws and principles, even though there could be many patriarchal overlays that had some degree of suppressing all that. This also can be reiterated with the Neptune in Sagittarius generation and this Mars new phase there, that this soul is remembering and bring in the 8th house. They are remembering or relating to shamanistic lifetimes, past lives. And so I just wanted to bring this into the conversation in regards to environmental conditionings before we get into the specifics of the Mars-Pluto phase and aspects. And so, Leroy, if you would you please unmute our volunteer and let her give any feedback to this background that I just mentioned?
Hello again, Kimari. Hello, everyone. Well, it relates completely with my experience because as I was really very young, I would have this experience, which I thought it was very normal, to go into bed and look into my third vision and see all kind of mandalas, and then I would see all these visions, and I thought everybody had them. It was like I was going to bed, I was going to lay down, and I was going to do my favorite thing. And I would have this very natural relationship with nature, with animals, and very intuitive sparks, as I wrote in the conditions. And for me, it would be very natural when I was young. When I was really like a child, it would be very natural. But with growing up, I understood that it was very very strong, and it was not common to everyone. And that was really weird to understand because I had no one to share the experience with. And I saw that with the nature experience and connection. People just wouldn't understand it. I would be completely related to this feeling, as I wrote, of the tribal feeling. My doll, for instance, would be an Indian, like a native, and I would be with her like she was my reference to myself. Like I knew that I belonged somewhere in indigenous reality. And some years ago, I started doing these retreats, and I could see in one of the retreats an image of this African woman in the middle of the savannah, and it was a very present and felt sense experience. Also, when I did ayahuasca, and I did several times, so sometimes not too many, like 5 times or something. And in every experience that I had, I would hear the name, a tribal name, always coming from deep from my heart, and it was a very tribal name, like Swahili. It would be like as if someone was screaming inside. And also it became, for me, at the beginning I was very young, and it became very exciting, that experience of being completely almost magic experience. I had a very difficult family in my childhood. There was a lot of violence, and I felt very powerful inside, although I couldn't understand why they were so miserable, because for me life was such a magic thing. I belonged to a big puzzle. In my experience when I was little, I felt like I was in this big puzzle where I belonged to everything. So I would look at them and I would think, why are they so miserable? This is also beautiful. And then I would go to school and I would really suffer with groups that that continue until today. When I'm with large groups, I always feel this internal compression and internal solitude, like I'm very, very alone, you know. And I think that really belongs, and it's coming to me now, to this tribal sensation, because one of the things that had it's been very present in my life is not being able to share what is like to be like me in a certain way. I mean, my friends, they find it very funny. People around me, they find it very interesting. They listen to my stories. They like them, and but they don't really grasp the experiences. And it has been always a little bit alone, and alone walking in this experiences. Of course, my friends would find it very funny, and because it was really strong and vivid experiences, but also mixed with a lot of drama at my house, at my school. Also, in sexuality was something very present in my life since I was very, very little. And that would bring these situations, everything would be very mixed, you know, like in my house, I would have this refugee in the nature, in this connection with God. I would feel very strong. It would be like my space. As I told Kim Marie, I wrote that I would be like an authority in my house, because I would be the one to separate my parents. I would be the one to say, you stay there, now you cannot talk. My mother would sleep with me, and I would have to, I used to be awake to protect her. So until today, I cannot sleep with someone in my bed because I feel I have to protect the person. So I had a very traumatic experience. And all this was very instantaneous, very natural. I had, for example, since I was around 6 years old, I would have this man that would always be wherever I was. And I would go to take a walk somewhere, I would look and he would be there. And he had this mental problem, okay? And it became very natural in my life until I was like 14. One day he tries to approach me in a way, and I was so scared, you know. And this day I have a dream that he goes into the that he kills himself in the train line, and in that day he did it. So I had like the vivid dream of what happened to him, and I was like 14 years old. So this was like, it became really, whoa, what's happening here? You know, like, is this real? And this was very, very strong, very, very strong until I was around 21 years old. My relationship to reality and would be like, this is a dream. Because, for instance, I used to daydream, and once I was daydreaming in my bed, and in the other day, what I daydreamed happened to another person. And I would become very frightened at the same time. Like, am I feeling what is going to happen? Do I know what is going to happen? Or am I creating the reality?
Sure.
So
Let me stop you, volunteer, okay? Because you're
yes, because I
talking.
can speak until, yeah.
Yep. You're talking several different subjects, and so
Yes.
we're going to back up. I have one question before I have Leroy go back to mute you, although I'm not getting feedback right now, so maybe we can stay live. Do you live in an urban setting today, or do you live in the country?
No, I live in the urban setting. I feel very responsible for my mom and for my brother with Down syndrome, because this kind of responsibility of my family has been something very present in my life. So nowadays my mother lives near me, and my brother lives in a home. So this all has been a very big process. My mother, she's very traumatized. She had a very difficult life. At the same time, she's very strong-willed, and she has a lot of love for life. But she has some psychological nervous problems, I would say. And so that has been something that has been like really present in my life, and I postpone my life in the country because of that. But since I was 30 years old, I've decided that I would have a profession that would help me go and do that choice of living in middle of nature. And so I started studying yoga, and that's when I started to prepare what I know that it's going to happen someday.
Sure.
But for now, I've made that choice of being present for them.
Sure, understand. Gotcha. So what I want to do, first of all,
Yes.
and yeah, now I'm getting feedback, so I'm going to have Leroy mute you again so it
Okay.
minimizes feedback. Thank you. What I want to do here, though, is go back to the 6th house Pluto and revisit or recap what we are looking here. Obviously, with all the Libra planets, we can see that there is some karmic relationships within family members, that Saturn is both Thalmic phase Pluto, so is Jupiter. Venus is really trying to move into the self-reliance. So I'm not here to discuss so much the familial relationship at the beginning. We can bring that in later. But when we have a sixth house Pluto, the Virgo soul, we have a soul who in various levels is really recognizing its power or lack thereof in the universe. It is the self-improvement house for the soul. It is the house where the soul goes through various experiences to realize that it may not necessarily be the center of the universe, coming off of the fifth house or Leo perspective. And so this soul can go through, relative to patriarchal distortions, various traumas as well, whether they be karmically built up or whether they be lessons to just help it be able to distinguish between what is natural versus what is distorted. Sixth house Plutos are learning service to the world. They're learning how to serve another person in a one-on-one basis. They're learning how to serve others in a general basis. They are also learning how do I best serve source. And this brings in the evolutionary intent for a sixth house Pluto of the opposite 12th house, the Pisces archetype. And so in general, Virgo souls are having to rebirth their relationship with source. And I will many times rephrase that as you are here to learn a life of value and meaning. You are here to learn that it is more than just the daily grind of the sixth house or Virgo existence. To have a volunteer who is quite intuitive, quite clear, what am I looking at? Clairaudient, being able to hear that other side, and to have someone who has felt a yearning for nature and memories of those past lives. You move into the evolutionary state of consciousness for this soul, in which they're beyond just finding deep value and meaning in life. That is still there, but they are then literally here, and we can move into talking this language. It's easy for all of us on these classes to speak third individuated, first spirituated. I'm giving you relevance for sixth house Pluto in case you draw them in consensus or first individuated, and they're going, well, what do you mean I got to find a relationship with source? I'm just trying to put food on the table. So that was a little side trip there. You can broaden that language into deeper values and meanings. Your life is more than just physical existence with the 12th house Pluto. This soul is beyond that. She's really evolving to rebirth her relationship with source, reconnect her relationship with source. And one of the things that just struck me on an intuitive level as I was doing the prep work, and by the way, volunteer, because of feedback, as you and I take turns speaking, you're welcome to make any notes. Just jot something down if you want to give feedback to anything that I'm saying. As we are really looking at rebirthing relationship with source and making it a conscious, living, 24/7 thing in her world, what struck me in her environmental conditionings that I shared is that she knows how to do it in the indigenous way. She has more or less a fair amount of far memory or past life memory that says, I remembered when we were one with nature.
I remembered how we lived with nature. But now, this 6th house Pluto with the Libra generational overlay and 3 planets in Libra, she is in process of learning an entirely new way of A, knowing source, and then B, how do I live this relationship with source in the mundane world of relationships with other people, in all their karma, in all their imperfections, in all this soul's own 6th house Pluto karma, and working on her own self-improvements. So I give you that foundation then for this 6th house Pluto to give us that deeper understanding of Mars now being crescent phase to that Pluto and being in the 60-degree aspect to Pluto and just beyond it. Reminding you, remember we said with that 60-degree aspect that there would be time periods where the soul needed to isolate itself from all of the external environment disseminating phase so that it can really discover for itself how it takes this desire nature to serve, Virgo soul, and then express it and teach it via Mars in Sag with that new phase to Neptune. So let me give you another example here of this. In her own feedback, and yes, I couldn't get all that feedback in there. One of the other things that she said, relationships would be tough. And, even today, she will isolate herself from groups, or she feels that she can't always express it with groups. In other words, with that Mars-Pluto waxing sextile, she's throwing back in upon herself with these groups to really internalize and ponder and discover how best to serve Mars, Neptune as the teacher, as the shaman. So it's a back and forth energy between going out there with people, disseminating phase, having them throw her back in upon herself to do all of the 6th house, internal analyzation and work, etc., to then rebirth all of her shamanistic knowledge, relationship with source out there in new ways. Mars waxing sextile to Pluto. Makes sense for everybody. If anybody has questions with what I just said, you're welcome to raise your hand. Leroy will unmute you and you can ask questions if you want to. And so I'm going to have you unmute volunteer again and just check in with you, volunteer. And again, I'm going to keep you focused, okay? I'm not going to let you wander with your conversations. We are going to be specific to Mars, Pluto right now. We can add in the other stuff a little bit later. But do you get what I just said, volunteer?
I did. It makes a lot of sense. One thing that I felt of after my first relationship, which was very traumatic, I went into a really deep process of internalization because I was this strong-willed girl full of power. And when I met him, I used to be used to have everything what I wanted. And when I was with him, and when we start having this relationship, there was a lot of things that I couldn't have, and that relationship showed me all of my weakness inside. It was very, very difficult relationship. and it was like mirroring the relationship of my parents. A lot of internal and difficult emotions to digest, a lot of very low self-esteem, a lot of insecurities, a lot of comparison with others. Very, very Libra. I'm very, very, very Libra. It's like in a lot of ways, and that relationship, it brought me down to a place that I really, really had to struggle to come up again. And it took me really, really long. At the same time, I was in this group. I was very into theater, and I went also in a lot of shock in relationships because of all the egos of the artistic world. I was very naive, in the sense that for me art was very the expression, and so all of that also made me see a lot of dark sides in friendships, so with women. And so it was a very difficult moment. I would say like very important moment in my story, because I broke myself into little pieces, I could say. And from the 24 years old until today, I've been rebuilding and healing, rebuilding and healing, rebuilding and healing. And what it was through spirituality that I did that rebuilding was through coming to my vulnerability, coming to my essence, coming to my truth, because I had a lot of compensation. I discovered that I had a lot of compensation due to my to having to be very strong in childhood. So what I found at some moments is that all this work with astrology and with meditation and with all in Reiki and everything, I was really into serve others. So I would learn, I would give. I would learn, I would give. Friendship was very important to me, as I didn't have a very strong family. My friends were like my family. So a lot of disappointment in there because displaced emotions towards friends also. So friendships are also this arena of evolving and coming to face with my own limits, in the sense of giving too much, not receiving, being disappointed, facing my fears, and I would serve, as you were saying, and at certain point I understood that, okay, wait a minute, I'm healing myself. And what you said of reconnecting with the source, it's very important, because what I feel a lot of times is that I lost that purity, very pure, that I used to have in that connection. It became like blurred, and that I have to reconnect again. So it made all the sense when you said how to reconnect in this very human day-to-day emotions, day-to-day relationships. And one thing that I always it always happens to me is that I start serving, and I would do that. And at a certain point in my life, I understood that no, I have to serve, but I also have to receive, because I have a lot of problems in receiving. It's very difficult for me to receive.
Yes.
You see?
Yes.
And at a certain point, understood, okay, you have a path of self-healing, which evolutionary astrology really helped me to understand. And through this self-healing, I am going to use this intuitive insights that I have, because they are still very strong, and to help others. So it was very clear to me that my emotional healing would be very helpful to others. Other thing that I see, which really connects what you're saying, is that giving classes is something that cleans my mind and cleans my auric field. It's like I become very energetic, and I become very happy, and it's something that is really, really good for me, as well as helping people, counseling them with the charts. It's really, really fulfilling, and I'm really learning the lesson to bring abundance to me, because I really have self-esteem issues, like a good sixth house Pluto and Venus sixth house, and and so it's for example, I'm going to have an event organized by me, like a yoga meditation event, and every time I publish it, I hurt myself. You see, I have uh, it's like somehow my unconscious blocks me towards having the success or the
It's
self-esteem
yeah,
that I receive.
it's the sixth house Pluto self-sabotage. So
Yes.
yes, so let me let me feedback now, okay, and
Okay.
move us through a little more based upon some other comments that you have made. For those of you who are listening, she is giving us comments with both the sixth house Pluto and the Pluto Libra generation, going back and forth between the two. So let's broaden it into adding on the Pluto generation in addition to just being the Virgo soul. First of all, though, I will say with the another archetype that falls in with the Virgo soul, and I, for me personally, I'm the Pluto Virgo generation. I've never really liked the word humility, not humility. Uh, what do I want to say? Humiliated. That phrase of the word. I always prefer to use self-improvement. There isn't one of us who doesn't have things go or happen in our life that doesn't humiliate us or cause us to have to readjust, or as I like to say, self-improve. So if any of you've noticed that little nuance, I use the word self-improvement with the sixth house. And so we will always have those situations that cause us to reflect, cause us to make adjustments, cause us to self-improve. So what I've been hearing from you, Volunteer, relative to that sixth house Pluto with the Libra overlay is that back and forth between being the stronger one in the relationship and being less strong in the relationship. The stronger one, the less strong. In many ways, what I feel that is it's bringing for your soul is, in addition to this Mars Pluto phase we're working with, you have Venus within that balsamic conjunction to Pluto. So you're finishing up lifetimes of really trying to deepen self-reliance within the soul, so that you have that balance in relationships of giving and receiving, and not you being the stronger nor you being the weaker. Yes, continual ebb and flow with that. And so what I'm picking up, and you can correct me if you disagree a little later, is that I'm also sensing on that Venus balsamic to Pluto, there is a work to really internalize the self-reliance, the self-love. I can have a relationship with myself, and I can have a treating myself better, treating myself as best as I can. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. And part of that lessening is that somewhere between lifetimes of living in indigenous cultures and natural law and having completely different experiences in relationships, as the patriarchal overlays came through, distorting things, I think that relative to this sixth house Pluto of yours, your soul has had various degrees of disillusionment with source from time to time. And the disillusionment relative to sixth house Plutos can be all of the sadomasochistic stuff that we hear in EA. I'm not worthy of source, the, victim side, or anger even at God. Why aren't you here? Why did you forsake me? The victor side, if you want. And I say these terms broadly. And so there are those parts of the sixth house Pluto Libra overlay that are also back and forth in your learning experience. And those are then being worked out through that Mars in Sag, eighth house. And Mars in Sag, eighth house, if I want to go in and add a little more to that picture for everyone as well. This is getting to Sag, self-honesty, Mars, eighth house, digging psychologically deep. So what can happen with Mars in that new phase with Neptune? While yes, it can be a very strong symbol of those lifetimes in the shamanistic world where waxing 60-degree mark to Pluto, it was different experiences, and it was much more harmonious, so to speak, in living with others. Mars new phase Neptune. Neptune can always bring in an element of confusion to any planet it operates with. It can also, relative to Sag, sometimes want to Sag float along the surface and just be easy rather than eighth house go psychologically deep. So even though your Mars Pluto is a 60-degree aspect, it still from time to time, relative to being in that eighth house and those 3 planets in Scorpio, we won't neglect those. It will from time to time, again, throw you inward, crescent phase, and really take you deep to get you to look at something from a broad perspective relative to that Mars Sag 8th house. So add on Neptune, really have you take deep look at yourself when you get thrown in upon yourself, when you have these circumstances with this, people in this modern world operating very egotistically, not always being honest, not always, being respectful to others. And so some of this may be built up from your own karma. Some of this may be your soul having to really evolve how you operate in relationships with other people. And so that Mars 60-degree crescent phase aspects to Pluto, you're at such strong choice points throughout this lifetime in how you operate, giving and receiving with other people. And you are continually fine tuning that whole balance between giving and receiving with others, relative to some relationships that may be easier than others, some relationships that may be harsher than it is with others. Making sense for everybody in regards to this? Questions that anybody may be having relative to what I'm saying? Leroy, if you want to unmute, volunteer for feedback again. Maybe I have Leroy downstairs. Are you there, Leroy?
Yes, I was indisposed at the upstairs potty room.
I'm taking a break.
Had to do it sometime.
I understand, honey.
Okay. Am I unmuting Andrea?
Yes, usually I can hear you running up and down the stairs. We work in different offices when we do webinars. I can sometimes hear you, but sometimes I guess I'm talking so much that I don't hear you. Sorry.
Yeah, here's Andrea.
All right, sweetie. I said several things in my last conversation, bringing in all of the relationship karma for you, bringing in some of the disillusionment with a source that can happen, sixth house Pluto on the I'm not worthy of side and anger at source side. Making sense with you with what I said also with Mars Pluto. And sometimes you're glossing over situations rather than digging psychologically deep. All that makes sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. I do that thing of being with people and then coming inside and digging, going really, really inside myself. And every time I have this relationship with someone that is abusive and somehow, and I see, I cannot believe that I didn't learn the lesson yet. And it happened to me a while ago, and it was really difficult to go again inside very deep to my weak points of why do I let myself go, okay, with no boundaries in some way.
That's all
And
the planets in Libra, including 3 in the 7th house. You realize you have 7 planets in either Libra or 7th. So
yes, I
you
do.
recognize the healthy boundaries and listening to that intuitiveness of Mars and Neptune when they say yes or no in regards to relationships.
Yes, and once in the classes that we have in
Mm-hmm.
segment one, I heard this colleague talking about how the relationship with the source is the relationship she must have, even when you, and I took that in realizing even when I'm with other people, I'm relating with the source.
And when you look at that archetype relative to being a 6th house Pluto, 12th house polarity, looking at source through others,
Mm-hmm.
it does not mean giving up healthy boundaries. Because relative to the patriarchal distortions, that's one of the things that can happen with the 6/12 polarity in general. And especially if we've had any religious, imprinting, unconditional love is, you're supposed to be, in the US, we call it Florence Nightingale or Mother Teresa, where you just sacrifice yourself all over the place until there's nothing left of you and you wonder why you're angry. It's learning that healthy balance,
Yes, true. Being truth to being true with the other person. Really,
Yes.
not. And I have one thing about this Pluto Mars crescent phase also. In my life, I've been like doing everything. Like I'm the person who does everything. I've tried all the experiences I have to try, and I read in the transcriptions from Jeff Green about Mars in the 8th house that, and I identified a lot with that freedom, absolute freedom that Mars in the 8th house or in the 1st house has. And I feel that I have that complete necessity for absolute freedom. I mean, everywhere, if there's this obstacle, you cannot go there, and or someone trying to stop me from going there, I say, okay, you don't let me, so I have to leave. Or even in my relationships, I need absolute freedom. For example, it's if I feel that the other person wants to control me somehow, or wants to make me his wife and the mother of his kids, that feeling, it's like I just feel like running away.
Two comments.
So see, yes.
Let me give you 2 comments as feedback.
Okay.
It's more the Mars in Sagittarius with the conjunction with Neptune that is bringing that sense of I need absolute freedom. Your last comment, the Mars in the 8th house, it's I need to feel powered. I need to feel empowered. And with having 4 planets in Libra, 3 in the 7th house, that boomerang to the 1st house and Aries side of freedom is what you're picking up on. People who have a lot of planets in the Libra 7th house archetype, they crave that polarity of freedom. That's the 2 areas where what you stated are just coming from. And so one of the things you're making a good point relative to Mars in that 60-degree or crescent phase aspect to the 6th house Pluto Libra, that crescent phase drawing you inward, all right, in some ways is teaching you that you can be as free as you desire to be. Okay. You get that? And again, it takes you inward to have you recognize it, not so much in the outer world that you don't have to take care of mom or brother and you can go do what you want to do whenever you want to do. Yes, that's valid, but it throws you inward crescent phase so that your soul gets it on a deep internalized level. One of the little phrases that I say about Pisces in the 12th house, that archetype, because it's the last of the 12 archetypes and all 11 archetypes are contained within it. What I say about Neptune, Pisces, and 12th, absolute self-responsibility brings
Mm-hmm.
absolute freedom. Get it?
Mm-hmm. I do get it. And it resonates completely with my life because I've been having all these experiences in my professional life, always feeling that I didn't belong and that what I was doing didn't fit my service. And today I work completely by myself. It's like I do it in my house. I'm completely free from any boss, everyone. I can do it my way, and I have total responsibility for myself. And I never felt better. I never felt better. It's like I feel that it's exactly what I have to do, and it has a lot to do with the polarity because it's the 12th house in Aries, so it's exactly what I need to do: be completely independent in my connection with the source, doing it my way, not how everybody does it, and doing it my way in a very strong connection. And yes, reconnecting with the source. Yes, completely.
And
And
then know, volunteer, that as you can work over towards that polarity evolutionary intent, it then gives you the freedom and free choice to also address all of the relationship lessons represented by the planets in Libra Scorpio. So it's not going over to isolation. There's a difference between freedom and isolation.
Yes, yes, but with all my Libra planets, it's like even if I wanted, even if I wanted, I think I have so many people in my world. It's like I'm a people person. It's I vibrate a lot with relationship. I relate very, very easily, not with groups. In groups, I feel this weird not belonging sensation, which is very, very difficult for me. But personally, I really have a lot of relationships, and what I want more is that feeling of intimacy that I've been working a lot with it because it's been very difficult for me to have that intimacy with the other.
Yes,
It's
those are,
something.
yep, that's the relationship lessening that's still on the horizon for your 6th house Pluto self-improvement. And let me give you
Okay.
one final comment with
Mm-hmm.
regard to the Mars Neptune in Sag.
Mm-hmm.
Sagittarius includes the archetype of alienation.
Mm.
And so sometimes we get alienated from others because it then houses self-reflect. And again, this is active polarity for somebody, energy moving outward, but sooner or later, something has to move us inward to balance that. And with Sagittarius, that will happen through alienation. And many times that alienation happens to throw us inward on ourselves to get to self-honesty and truth within. And we're doing that so that it metamorphoses all of that relationship energy for you. All right, volunteer, I've got to keep track of time here for everybody. I thank you very much for volunteering your chart, being willing to show up with us. Lovely to be able to interact with you some, and thank you for wanting to study with EAN, and wish you all the best over there on your side of the world. I think Leroy muted you, so I'm going to say thank you back, volunteer. He now he's back to his trigger finger muting and unmuting. And so thank you everyone who showed up live. And I have one more opportunity. Anybody listening, questions or comments for us? Otherwise, we'll move forward.
Well, the board's clear, Kim. The board is clear.
Okay. Oh, someone raised their hand. Okay.
Go
I'm
ahead, Lindsay.
assuming.
Hi, Kim Marie. This is Lindsay.
Hi.
Hi, I have a question about the sun and the moon position, about being the first quarter. Would that kind of echo, kind of be like an echo signature of what's going on with that first quarter square with Mars and Pluto?
Well, we don't have Mars to a first quarter square with Pluto. They're only 60 degrees.
Oh,
They're
right.
they're fully in crescent phase. You know, there's 27 degrees before first quarter. So ask me the question again relative to moon and sun.
Well, yeah, moon and sun would be ahead of that position of Mars and Pluto. So
Yes.
I could think about that in terms of progression, I suppose. But yeah, I'm incorrect on the space between Mars and Pluto. Thank you.
Oh, that's no worries, babe. No worries, not at all. Questions from anybody else? We could bring the full chart in and look forever. And I know that you all spark on different planets and their aspects and the rulerships and all of that. And you're all welcome to just take yourself forward with this chart however you want to. My role leading the lesson is always to focus that funnel for us on whatever the subject matter is. So do not mean to neglect aspects of various things in the chart. I'm just really trying to focus the lesson. So thank you all for understanding. Anybody else has a comment or question, just raise your hand to Leroy. As we move forward here, I was reviewing my volunteers and I think I'm pretty much full. Other than if you have Mars in a last quarter phase between 270 and 315, I do have space for one more volunteer. I have tried to reach out to almost everybody today in regards to the dates you're going to be volunteering. There's a couple of people that I've got to just do some research with emails with, and then we'll be set for classes. And so finally, here's the public webinars. Last night we did Saturn in Aquarius through archetypes and cycles and all that stuff that's going on. The contagion of Aquarius with coronavirus right now. I had lots to say on that. Tomorrow we'll go through Saturn and Aquarius through the 12 houses, which should be valid for the next 3 years. And you can see we have a couple classes coming up in May and June. All
And
right.
Wanda has a question, if you don't mind.
Sure,
Wanda,
go ahead.
are you mic'd, Wanda?
She usually is.
Okay, I've unmuted her, but I think we might have lost her. I think she knew we were closing. So at any rate, we'll get Wanda next time.
Hey, if anybody is still on here, tell Wanda to ask the question in segment 1 on Facebook, okay? And I'll do the same thing. All right, thank you very much, everyone.